Captain Ben Harper stepped through the transport beam onto Earth Defense Station Hermes, with the confidence of a man who had commanded ships through the worst battles humanity had ever faced. His first officer, Commander Helen Price, materialized beside him, and both wore uniforms that displayed ribbons and medals from wars that had not yet been fought. Their faces carried the hard lines that came from making life and death decisions for years, and their eyes held knowledge of terrible events that they hoped to prevent from ever happening in this timeline. Admiral Kevin Brooks had arrived at the station to meet with the time travelers, and he studied Harper carefully as the captain from the future walked into the main briefing room. The assembled Earth Defense Committee included representatives from every major nation and military organization on Earth, because the implications of a time-traveling warship were too important for any single government to handle alone. Harper wasted no time with small talk as he activated a holographic projector that showed a three-dimensional map of the solar system. His voice carried the weight of absolute certainty as he pointed to a location beyond Pluto and announced that in 71 hours, a Zephyrian scout fleet would arrive at that exact spot. The aliens represented the advance force of a galactic empire that had conquered 14 different species across their section of the galaxy, and Earth was scheduled to be their 15th conquest. The room erupted with questions and demands for proof, but Harper continued his presentation with grim determination. He explained that in his original timeline, humanity had been caught completely unprepared for the Zephyrian arrival. Earth's defenses had been designed to fight other humans and were completely inadequate against alien technology that was centuries ahead of human development. The planet had fallen within 6 days, and 3 billion people had died in the first week of occupation alone. Commander Helen Price took over the presentation and showed detailed images of Zephyrian ships that looked more like living creatures than mechanical constructs. The vessels moved through space with an organic flowing motion, and their hulls seemed to shift and adapt during combat. She explained that the aliens were not just technologically superior to humans, but they were also psychically linked to each other, which made their coordination in battle almost perfect. Dr. Lisa Carter studied the technical data that Harper provided, and her scientific training told her that the information was far too detailed and consistent to be fabricated. The battle plans and enemy capabilities were documented with the precision that only came from actual combat experience. The temporal equations that explained how the Defiance had traveled back in time were beyond current human understanding, but the mathematical principles appeared sound. Harper continued his briefing by explaining that the Zephyrians had built their empire by following a specific pattern of conquest. They would send scout fleets to identify suitable worlds, and then follow up with overwhelming force that gave their targets no chance to organize effective resistance. Species that surrendered quickly were allowed to continue existing as slave races, while those that fought were completely destroyed as an example to others. The captain from the future activated another hologram that showed Earth as it existed in his timeline after the Zephyrian conquest. The planet's surface was scarred with massive industrial complexes where human slaves worked to extract resources for the alien empire. Major cities had been reduced to rubble, and the surviving human population was kept in controlled areas where they could be easily managed by their alien masters. Admiral Brooks asked about the resistance movement that Harper had mentioned and learned that surviving humans had spent decades fighting a guerrilla war against the occupying forces. The resistance had achieved some success by learning to use captured Zephyrian technology, but they were always outnumbered and outgunned. The time travel experiment that sent the Defiance back had been their last desperate attempt to change history. Commander Price explained the technical details of how they had managed to travel through time using a combination of captured alien technology and theoretical human physics. The process had required enormous amounts of energy and had probably destroyed the device that sent them back, which meant they could not return to their own timeline. They were committed to either saving this version of Earth or dying in the attempt. Harper revealed that the Zephyrians' greatest weakness was their overconfidence in their superiority over other species. They had never encountered a race that knew they were coming or understood their tactics and technology. In every previous conquest, the aliens had relied on shock and overwhelming technological advantage to crush resistance before it could organize effectively. The time travelers provided detailed intelligence about Zephyrian ship designs and weapon systems, along with tactical information about how the aliens fought in space battles. They shared the locations of weak points in enemy vessels and explained the best methods for disrupting the psychic coordination that made the alien fleet so effective. This knowledge had been purchased with human blood over many years of desperate fighting. Dr. Carter realized that even if the time travelers were somehow mistaken about the invasion, the technology and knowledge they offered could advance human civilization by centuries. The scientific data alone was worth the risk of believing their story and preparing for a war that might never come. Admiral Brooks agreed and authorized the immediate implementation of emergency defense preparations. President Richard Stone received a secure communication from Admiral Brooks explaining the situation, and within hours the leader of the most powerful nation on Earth was addressing the United Nations with news that would change human civilization forever. The president explained that Earth faced an imminent threat from hostile aliens, and that humanity would need to unite completely if they hoped to survive the coming battle. Harper concluded his briefing by making it clear that the Defiance and its crew were ready to fight alongside Earth's forces, but they could not win the battle alone. The warship from the future was powerful, but the Zephyrian fleet would outnumber them by at least 10-1. Victory would depend on how quickly humanity could adapt their tactics and technology to fight an enemy unlike anything they had ever faced before. The next 70 hours would determine whether the human race had a future among the stars or would join the 14 other species that had fallen to the Zephyrian Empire. President Richard Stone stood before the United Nations General Assembly and delivered the most important speech in human history as he revealed the existence of the time-traveling warship and the coming alien invasion. Representatives from nearly every nation on Earth listened in stunned silence as their leader explained that humanity had less than 60 hours to prepare for a war that would determine whether their species survived or joined 14 others as slaves to a galactic empire. The initial reaction was panic and disbelief, but within hours something remarkable began to happen as humans around the world started working together in ways that had never been seen before. Admiral Kevin Brooks established a joint command center at Earth Defense Headquarters where military leaders from every major nation worked alongside Captain Harper and his crew from the future. The time travelers shared detailed battle plans and tactical information, while Earth's officers coordinated the recall of every military vessel in the solar system. Cargo ships and civilian transports were pressed into service as support vessels, while construction crews worked around the clock to retrofit existing warships with advanced weapons technology provided by the Defiance. Dr. Lisa Carter led a team of the world's best scientists in a desperate attempt to understand and adapt the advanced technology that Harper's ship had brought back from the future. While they could not fully comprehend systems that were centuries ahead of their time, they managed to identify key defensive technologies that could be adapted to Earth's existing infrastructure. Planetary defense grids received massive upgrades as engineers worked to install shield generators and weapons platforms based on designs that had proven effective against Zephyrian forces. The Defiant served as both a mobile weapons platform and a training facility as Harper's crew taught Earth's military officers tactics that had been learned through years of desperate fighting. Commander Helen Price worked with pilots and ship commanders to explain how Zephyrian vessels moved and fought in space battles. The aliens coordinated their attacks through psychic links, which made them incredibly effective, but also created vulnerabilities that could be exploited by forces that understood their methods. Commander Jake Morrison found himself promoted to Admiral and placed in command of Earth's hastily assembled defense fleet. The responsibility was overwhelming as he realized that the fate of his entire species now rested on decisions he would make in the coming battle. Harper worked closely with him to develop a battle plan that would use Earth's smaller numbers and inferior technology to maximum advantage against an enemy that had never faced organized resistance from their intended victims. Manufacturing facilities around the world switched to wartime production as billions of people worked to support the defense effort. Factories that had been making consumer goods retooled to produce weapons and armor, while shipyards that normally built civilian vessels started construction of military craft using designs provided by the time travelers. The transformation was unprecedented in human history, as every available resource was dedicated to preparing for the alien attack. President Stone coordinated with world leaders to ensure that civilian populations were prepared for the worst possible outcome. Emergency shelters were stocked with supplies while evacuation plans were developed for major population centers. Unlike Harper's timeline, where panic had crippled Earth's response, this version of humanity showed remarkable unity and determination as people worked together, knowing that their very survival depended on victory in the coming battle. Dr. Carter's team achieved a breakthrough when they successfully adapted Defiant's shield technology to protect Earth's orbital installations. The energy requirements were enormous, but fusion power plants around the world were linked together to provide the necessary power. Defense satellites were repositioned and upgraded with weapons that could penetrate Zephyrian armor, while sensor networks were expanded to provide early warning of the alien fleet's arrival. Harper revealed additional intelligence about Zephyrian psychology and culture that would be crucial in the coming battle. The aliens viewed other species as inherently inferior and had never developed tactics to deal with enemies that fought with foreknowledge of their capabilities. Their overconfidence would be their weakness if Earth's forces could exploit it properly during the crucial first moments of contact. Commander Price established training programs at military academies around the world where officers learned combat, doctrine that had been paid for with human blood in a timeline that might never come to pass. She emphasized that the Zephyrians' greatest strength was their coordination, but this also made them predictable to forces that understood their patterns. Human unpredictability and adaptability would be key advantages if they could be used effectively. Lieutenant Amy Walsh coordinated communications between Earth's defense forces and the various civilian agencies that were supporting the war effort. Her role expanded far beyond her original duties as she became a key link between military commanders and the scientists and engineers who were working to adapt alien technology for human use. The communication networks she established would be crucial for coordinating attacks during the chaotic conditions of space battle. Admiral Morrison conducted final inspections of Earth's defense fleet and was amazed by what humanity had accomplished in such a short time. Ships that had been civilian transports just days earlier now carried weapons capable of damaging Zephyrian vessels, while crews that had never fought in space learned tactics from veterans of wars that had not yet happened. The transformation was incomplete, but it might be enough if everything went according to plan. Harper spent the final hours before the invasion sharing personal messages from loved ones in his timeline who had not survived the original Zephyrian attack. The emotional weight of carrying these final words motivated everyone involved in the defense preparations, as they realized they were not just fighting for their own survival, but for the memory of billions who had died in a future that they hoped to prevent. The countdown reached its final phase as sensor networks detected the first signs of the approaching Zephyrian fleet. Long-range scanners picked up the distinctive energy signatures of alien ships moving through hyperspace toward Earth's solar system. Admiral Morrison took his position aboard the flagship Valor, while Captain Harper prepared the Defiance for what would be the most important battle in human history. Dr. Carter completed the final calibration of Earth's defense systems, while President Stone addressed the world one last time before the battle began. The leader's words were broadcast to every human settlement in the solar system, as he reminded his species that they had always been at their best when facing impossible odds. The stage was now set for a confrontation that would determine whether humanity earned its place among the stars, or joined the countless other species that had fallen to the Zephyrian Empire's relentless expansion across the galaxy. The Zephyrian fleet emerged from hyperspace in perfect formation, exactly where Captain Harper had predicted they would arrive, and their biomechanical ships moved through space with the fluid grace of living creatures hunting prey. The alien vessels numbered 47 ships ranging from small scouts to massive battlecruisers that dwarfed anything in Earth's defense fleet. Their hulls gleamed with an organic sheen that seemed to pulse with internal life, while ports opened like mouths preparing to feed on human resistance. Admiral Jake Morrison watched from the bridge of the flagship Valor as the enemy fleet approached Earth's outer defensive perimeter and felt the weight of his entire species' survival resting on the decisions he would make in the next few hours. The battle plan developed with Harper's help was their only hope against an enemy that possessed overwhelming technological superiority and had never known defeat in their conquest of 14 other species across the galaxy. Captain Ben Harper, commanded the Defiance from the center of Earth's formation and prepared to lead the first attack against ships identical to those that had destroyed his world in another timeline. His vessel was humanity's most powerful weapon, but it was also their greatest source of intelligence about Zephyrian capabilities and weaknesses. The time travelers would either save this version of Earth or die trying to prevent the future they had lived through from happening again. The Zephyrian command ship transmitted a surrender demand in perfect English that had been learned from studying other conquered species. The alien commander identified himself as war leader Kresh and offered humanity the same terms that had been given to every other race they had encountered. Immediate surrender would result in slavery under the Zephyrian Empire, while resistance would lead to complete extermination as an example to other species who might consider defying their will. Admiral Morrison responded with a message that had been carefully crafted to exploit Zephyrian psychology according to Harper's intelligence about their culture. He announced that humanity rejected their terms and challenged them to take Earth by force if they could. The response was calculated to trigger the aliens' overconfidence and cause them to approach the battle as a simple punishment action rather than a serious military engagement. War leader Kresh reacted exactly as Harper had predicted and ordered his fleet to advance in standard conquest formation that had proven effective against every other species they had encountered. The Zephyrian ships moved forward with their psychic coordination, making their movements appear almost like a dance as they prepared to demonstrate their superiority over yet another primitive species that dared to defy their empire. The battle began when Earth's defense platforms opened fire with weapons upgraded, using technology from the Defiance that could penetrate Zephyrian shields and armor. The aliens were shocked to discover that their supposedly primitive enemies possessed weapons capable of damaging their ships, but they quickly adapted their formation to minimize the effectiveness of the planetary defenses. Harper led the Defiance in a spearhead attack that caught the Zephyrian fleet completely off guard, as the mysterious human vessel displayed capabilities that should not have existed for centuries. The ship's advanced weapon systems carved through enemy formations with precision that seemed almost supernatural, while its shields absorbed damage that would have destroyed any other vessel in Earth's fleet. Commander Helen Price coordinated fighter squadrons that had been trained to exploit weaknesses in Zephyrian coordination that had been discovered through years of desperate fighting in Harper's timeline. Human pilots executed complex maneuvers that disrupted the aliens' psychic links and forced them to fight as individual ships rather than as a coordinated force. The effect was immediately noticeable, as Zephyrian formations began to lose their perfect synchronization. Dr. Lisa Carter monitored the battle from Earth's command center while coordinating the use of adapted alien technology that her team had managed to integrate into Earth's defense systems. Shield generators protected key installations while weapons platforms delivered devastating attacks against enemy vessels that had expected to face inferior human technology. The scientists' modifications proved crucial in evening the odds between Earth's defenders and their technologically superior attackers. Lieutenant Amy Walsh managed communications between Earth's scattered defense forces while coordinating attacks that struck multiple Zephyrian targets simultaneously. Her network allowed human commanders to exploit moments of confusion in enemy ranks when their psychic coordination was disrupted by the unconventional tactics that Commander Price had taught them. The tide of battle shifted when Admiral Morrison led Earth's main fleet in a coordinated attack that targeted the Zephyrian command structure exactly as Harper had planned. The aliens found themselves facing an enemy that knew their tactical doctrine better than they knew it themselves, while human forces used knowledge gained from a future war to exploit every weakness in Zephyrian ship design and combat procedures. War. Leader Kresh realized that his fleet was facing unprecedented resistance from a species that should have been helpless against his forces. The humans were using tactics and technology that seemed impossible for their level of development, while fighting with a coordination and determination that the Zephyrian Empire had never encountered before. For the first time in his military career, the alien commander faced the possibility of defeat. Harper pushed the Defiance deep into enemy formation and used intelligence from his timeline to identify the exact location of the Zephyrian fleet's psychic coordination center. His ship's weapons targeted the specific systems that maintained the aliens' mental links, while Earth's other vessels concentrated their fire on ships that had been identified as key nodes in the enemy command structure. The breakthrough came when multiple Zephyrian command vessels were destroyed simultaneously, and their fleet's psychic network collapsed into chaos. Individual alien ships found themselves isolated and confused as they lost the mental connection that had guided their every action for their entire military careers. Human forces pressed their advantage against enemies that were suddenly fighting, as individuals rather than as parts of a greater whole. President Richard Stone monitored the battle from deep underground bunkers while coordinating civilian support efforts that kept Earth's defense systems operating at peak efficiency. Unlike Harper's timeline, where panic had crippled the human response, this version of humanity showed remarkable unity, as billions of people worked together to support their defenders in orbit. The final phase of the battle saw Zephyrian ships beginning to retreat as war leader Kresh acknowledged that his invasion had failed against an enemy that possessed impossible knowledge of his force's capabilities. The alien commander sent a message to the Zephyrian Empire, warning them that Earth was defended by forces far more dangerous than any they had encountered before. Admiral Morrison watched enemy vessels fleeing toward hyperspace, while Harper confirmed that the immediate threat to Earth had been eliminated. The victory was complete, but both commanders understood that this was only the beginning of humanity's involvement in galactic affairs. The Zephyrian Empire now knew that Earth existed and possessed technology and tactics that could challenge their expansion for the first time in their history. Commander Jake Morrison looked out at the stars from his place on the bridge of Earth Defense Station Hermes and saw nothing but empty space where something impossible had just happened. The morning had started like any other day in the outer edge of the solar system, where his station kept watch for threats that might come from deep space. His crew of 28 people worked at their posts, checking sensors and running daily reports, when everything changed in one moment that would shake the foundation of what humans thought they knew about the universe. Lieutenant Amy Walsh sat at her communication station reading the daily reports from patrol ships when her screen suddenly lit up with warning signals. The sensors had detected something that should not exist according to every law of physics that humans understood. A massive energy reading appeared on her instruments, showing something huge materializing from absolutely nothing, as if the fabric of space had been torn open like paper, and something pushed through from another place entirely. Amy called out to Commander Morrison with excitement and fear mixed in her voice as she tried to make sense of what her instruments were telling her. The energy signature was unlike anything in their databases, and it was getting stronger by the second. Morrison moved quickly to her station and looked at the readings with growing concern as he realized they were looking at something that challenged everything humans knew about how the universe worked. The massive object that appeared in their sensors was clearly a starship, but it was bigger than anything humans had ever built. The vessel stretched nearly 2 kilometers from front to back, and its hull showed signs of damage from battles that looked like they had been fought across many years. The ship's design was strange and seemed to combine different types of technology that did not match anything in human records or the records of the few alien species that humans had met in their early exploration of nearby star systems. Dr. Lisa Carter worked in the science section of the station, and her instruments were going wild with readings that made no sense. She ran scan after scan on the mysterious ship, and each one told her something that should have been impossible. The A vessel's energy patterns showed clear signs that it had traveled through time itself, and the technology she could detect was hundreds of years ahead of anything humans had developed. Yet somehow the ship was clearly of human origin, with design elements and materials that matched human engineering principles. What made the situation even more strange was that the ship was broadcasting identification codes that would not be invented for another 50 years according to Earth's development timeline. The codes were definitely human, and they were being transmitted on frequencies that Earth defense used, but the encryption methods were far more advanced than anything currently available to human forces. Lieutenant Amy Walsh received the first direct communication from the mysterious vessel, and her hands shook as she heard a human voice speaking perfect English. The voice belonged to someone who identified himself as Captain Ben Harper of the Terran battleship Defiance. His words sent chills through everyone on the bridge as he delivered a message that seemed impossible to believe. He claimed to have traveled back in time from the year 2157 and warned that humanity's future depended on what would happen in the next 72 hours. Commander Morrison struggled to process what he was hearing as Captain Harper continued his transmission. The man from the future spoke with the authority of someone who had lived through terrible events, and his voice carried the weight of knowledge that came from seeing humanity face extinction. Harper requested permission to approach Earth Defense, Station Hermes, so that he could share information that would be crucial to human survival. Dr. Lisa Carter completed her detailed scans of the Defiance and confirmed what everyone feared to believe. The quantum signature of the ship showed without doubt that it had been displaced through time, and the battle damage on its hull was real. The vessel had clearly fought in wars that had not yet happened in this timeline, and the technology aboard, the ship represented centuries of human advancement, compressed into systems that current human science could barely understand. The news of the time-traveling warship spread quickly through Earth's command structure as Morrison reported the situation to his superiors. Admiral Kevin Brooks received the report at Earth Defense Headquarters and made the difficult decision to allow the mysterious ship to approach Earth. Whatever the appearance of the Defiance meant for humanity, it was clear that they would need to face the situation with courage and unity. Captain Harper transmitted detailed star charts showing the current position of his ship and requested a meeting with Earth's military leadership. His tone suggested urgency as he explained that time was running short for humanity to prepare for what was coming. The Defiance began moving slowly toward Earth, while broadcasting continuous identification signals to prove that despite its advanced technology, it truly was a human vessel from a possible future. Morrison and his crew watched on their screens as the massive battleship approached their station. The vessel's weapon systems were clearly visible, and they appeared to be far more powerful than anything in Earth's current arsenal. Yet Harper had made no threatening moves and continued to request cooperation rather than demanding it. The captain from the future seemed to understand that his arrival would be shocking, and was trying to minimize panic while conveying the importance of his mission. As the Defiance drew closer, Amy Walsh established regular communication with the ship and learned more details about its crew. They were all human, and many carried names that suggested they were descendants of people currently living on Earth. Their uniforms displayed battle honors from conflicts that had never happened, and their faces showed the strain of fighting a war that lasted many years. Dr. Carter prepared her laboratory to receive data downloads from the Defiance, while Morrison coordinated with Earth Defense Command to arrange for the meeting that Captain Harper had requested. Whatever the truth about this ship from the future, humanity would soon learn whether they were about to face their greatest challenge or receive their salvation from an unexpected source that had appeared from nowhere when they needed it most. The aftermath of humanity's victory over the Zephyrian fleet sent shockwaves across the galaxy as news spread through interstellar communication networks that a primitive species had achieved the impossible by defeating the empire that had conquered 14 different civilizations. For the first time in recorded galactic history, a Zephyrian expansion had been completely repelled, and the implications of this unprecedented event would reshape the balance of power among the stars for generations to come. Captain Ben Harper and his crew from the Defiance faced a strange new reality as they realized that their mission had succeeded beyond their wildest hopes, but it also stranded them permanently in a timeline that was no longer their own. The future they had come from would never exist because humanity had won the battle that had destroyed their world in the original timeline. Dr. Lisa Carter worked with the time travelers' scientists to understand the implications of their temporal displacement, but the answer was clear and final. Admiral Jake Morrison found himself thrust into a role he had never expected as Earth's military leadership tasked him with establishing humanity's first contact protocols for dealing with the galactic community that they were now part of, whether they wanted to be or not. The victory over the Zephyrians had proven that humans possessed the capability to defend themselves, but it had also announced their presence to every species within hundreds of light years of Earth. President Richard Stone addressed the United Nations in a historic session that would establish the framework for humanity's future among the stars. The revelation that Earth was part of a galaxy filled with intelligent species required a complete restructuring of human government and society. The president announced the formation of the Terran Federation that would unite all human nations under a single authority for dealing with interstellar affairs, while allowing individual countries to maintain their internal autonomy. The technology and knowledge gained from the Defiance became the foundation for a new era of human development, as Dr. Carter led international teams of scientists in reverse engineering systems that were centuries ahead of current human capabilities. The breakthrough discoveries were shared freely among all Earth's nations to ensure that no single country could dominate the others through technological superiority. Humanity would face the galaxy as a united species or not at all. Commander Helen Price established the Academy for Galactic Warfare in the ruins of what had been a civilian university, before the Zephyrian crisis forced humanity to prioritize military development above all other concerns. Her new institution would train future generations of human officers in tactics and strategies that had been paid for with blood, in a timeline that no longer existed, but whose lessons remained valuable for the challenges that lay ahead. The Defiance itself became a symbol of human resilience as the massive warship took up permanent station in Earth orbit, where it served as both a powerful guardian and a reminder of what humans could achieve when they faced extinction. Captain Harper accepted promotion to Admiral in the new Terran Defense Force, and his knowledge of future technologies made him invaluable for protecting Earth against threats that might emerge from the depths of space. Lieutenant Amy Walsh received command of one of Earth's first interstellar exploration vessels as humanity began the dangerous process of venturing beyond their home system to make contact with other species. Her ship, the Explorer, carried diplomatic teams and scientists who would represent humanity to civilizations that had existed among the stars for thousands of years, while Earth was still developing primitive agriculture and discovering fire. The galactic reaction to humanity's victory was swift and dramatic, as species that had suffered under Zephyrian expansion began sending ambassadors to Earth seeking alliance with the mysterious newcomers who had achieved what everyone thought was impossible. Representatives from 12 different civilizations arrived in the solar system within months of the battle, bringing offers of trade and mutual defense agreements. Admiral Morrison established protocols for these first diplomatic contacts while working to understand the complex web of alliances and conflicts that dominated galactic politics. Humanity's sudden emergence as a military power had upset the established order and created opportunities for smaller species to challenge the dominance of empires that had ruled them for centuries. The Zephyrian Empire itself was forced to acknowledge that their expansion had been halted for the first time in their history, and war leader Kresh faced execution for his failure to conquer what should have been a helpless, primitive world. The alien leadership began preparing for a larger invasion force that would crush Earth's defenses through overwhelming numbers, but intelligence networks established by other species warned humanity of these preparations. Harper shared additional knowledge from his timeline about other threats that humanity might face in the coming decades, as Earth's presence became known throughout the galaxy. The Zephyrians were not the only hostile empire that viewed other species as potential slaves or resources to be exploited. Human survival would depend on building alliances with friendly civilizations, while preparing for conflicts that were inevitable once Earth's location became widely known. President Stone announced the establishment of permanent colonies on Mars and several moons of Jupiter to ensure that humanity could not be destroyed by a single devastating attack on Earth. The colonial expansion program used technology adapted from the Defiance to build settlements that could support millions of people while serving as industrial centers for the growing Terran Federation. Dr. Carter made breakthrough discoveries in faster-than-light travel that would allow human ships to explore the galaxy and establish trade relationships with distant civilizations. The scientist's work was based on theoretical principles that she had learned from studying the Defiance's propulsion systems, combined with new insights gained from diplomatic exchanges with friendly alien species. The transformation of human society accelerated as billions of people adapted to the reality of living in a galaxy filled with intelligent life. Educational systems were redesigned to teach children about alien cultures and technologies, while research institutions focused on developing the scientific knowledge that would be necessary for humanity to compete with civilizations that had thousands of years of advancement. Commander Price's academy graduated its first class of officers trained specifically for interstellar warfare and diplomacy, as humanity prepared for the challenges that would inevitably arise from their new status as a galactic power. The graduates carried with them knowledge from a future that would never exist, but whose lessons would help protect the timeline that they now inhabited. The final scene of humanity's transformation showed Earth as it appeared from space with orbital installations and defense platforms surrounding the planet like a protective shell. The blue and green world that had once been isolated and empty, space was now the center of a growing interstellar civilization that stretched across multiple star systems and included alliance with species from across the galaxy. Captain Amy Walsh transmitted the first official message from the Terran Federation to the galactic community as her exploration vessel prepared to venture into unknown regions of space. Her words carried the confidence of a species that had proven its worth in battle, while extending friendship to those who sought peaceful coexistence with humanity's expanding civilization among the stars.